Thanks very much, sir, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Congratulations to you on the approval on ISM 2.0 and, of course, PLI 2.0 for smartphones. So let's first begin with ISM 2.0. ISM 1.0 gave clearances to at least 12 projects. What is it that you're expecting with respect to ISM 2.0?
ISM 2.0, I think, should see a further deepening of the semiconductor ecosystem in India. We clearly will target at least 3 to 4 fabs. One, a conventional logic or memory fab, silicon-based fab. Then possibly one, definitely a display fab. And 2 or 3 maybe compound semiconductor fabs. This would be broadly our goal or target in terms of deepening the fab ecosystem. Advanced packaging is another important component that we'll be focusing on. And in addition, I think the truly innovative part about this is the ecosystem approach in terms of making sure that equipment manufacturers, materials manufacturers, gases, chemicals, and testing devices manufacturers, all of them are enabled to come into the country. On top of that, of course, is the modifications we'll be making to the design-linked incentive scheme so that we are able to promote more fabless companies in the country as well. So these would be some of the key elements of ISM 2.0.
Absolutely, and getting integrated into the global supply chain, that is also something that the government of India is increasingly looking at. But sir, what are the kind of investments that you're expecting with this scheme, and when will the application window roll out?
The application window will roll out shortly. We will finalize the notification and the guidelines and issue them soon, at which point you'll be aware of what the contours of the scheme, the precise contours of the scheme and the precise breakup is. We would expect that, given the level of subsidy which we have specified, we should be expecting about 4 to 5 lakh crores of investment.
Okay. That's quite encouraging. But so let me also ask you about, one of the other aspects of the scheme, which is the incentive part of the scheme. Now, that's been trimmed a little, that's been tapered down a little. What is the government's approach to that? Because it's coming in at a time when the global chips race is also intensifying.
I think this is a very carefully considered decision after a great deal of consultation with industry stakeholders and experts, who believe that now the time has come to, based on the success of ISM 1.0 and the fact that we have broken ground. When ISM 1.0 came in, there was no semiconductor industry worth its name in the country. Now we've broken ground there, and the credibility of India as a destination for investments in semiconductor manufacturing has been established to some extent. And therefore, the extent of subsidy which is required will not be as much. The second factor, of course, is that when ISM 1.0 came in, it was not clear what kind of assistance the state governments themselves would offer. Now, state governments have also offered through their own policies and other guidelines additional subsidy. So on the whole, taking the central and the state government subsidies, we would, we believe, be quite competitive in the international market.
So it's not going to impact the operational costs of companies, and there's not going to be any impact?
I think it should prove attractive.
Okay. So one of the other key aspects, and I think it's been a highlight of the ISM 2.0 mission, is the fact that the government is also open to taking equity in companies or co-investment. That is also a proposal. How will that really work out? And at some point in time, will the government also be interested in the management of the company, given the fact that you're looking at taking a stake?
No, we are not interested at all in the management of the company. I think that's fairly clear. The reason we are looking at co-investment is that beyond the grant that we provide to startups and other entities, the money may not be adequate for them to scale up. They require additional investment. And we are deliberately calling it co-investment because we are not going to make that investment upfront. It is going to be deep tech funds and others who would be whitelisted, and when they make an investment, we make an investment alongside them. The intent there is twofold. One is to offer additional support, of course, and two is to crowd in more private equity and venture capital kind of investment into this segment. India's deep tech VC investment is as yet limited, so this is an effort to crowd in some of that kind of investment. And we are clearly not interested in management stakes, and there are options for the government to exit at multiple stages.
Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
You will find out when the guidelines come.
Okay. So let's also talk about PLI 2.0 for smartphones. The capex outlay has, of course, considerably increased at a time when India's smartphone exports have consistently performed well. And in fact, the government of India also had prioritized certain geographies, certain newer geographies. So, of course, these exports have done well in those geographies as well. What is your intent with part 2 of this particular scheme? What is going to be the thrust of the scheme?
The thrust of the scheme is to maintain India's competitiveness in this space, because there are still issues of disability for the smartphone industry. Till such time that the electronic component manufacturing scheme benefits fully kick in terms of indigenization of a significant portion of the value chain, I think we will continue to have cost disabilities which we will have to address. And the idea is fundamentally to make India competitive.
Absolutely. So when you talk about indigenization, we do know that, there was a note that was floated. In fact, this exercise is being taken up by DPIIT. They've met several sectors. They were asked for inputs on which components or which items can be indigenized, because India is looking at that in light of the developments in West Asia. Would you be able to throw some light on what is going to be?
As far as the electronic sector is concerned, thanks to continued attention through various schemes, including the PLI scheme, including the ECMS scheme, those concerns are already getting addressed.
So you have, you will not be sharing a list with TPIIT? You don't?
No, we are, but I think we are not, in the sense, the topmost priority in that list, because we are already addressing the concerns which they intend to address now. Because I think in some senses electronics represented an early harvest for that set, because you must recall that one of the reasons why various programs were launched to encourage electronics manufacturing in the country was the concern that electronics imports were rising very rapidly.
Absolutely. And, speaking about Pax Silica, you did go to the United States and you met your counterpart, Jacob Helberg. Give us a sense of the conversations that you had in terms of the role that India is going to play in Pax Silica. And so what about export controls? Give us a sense of the conversations on that front as well, because, AI is developing across geographies, whether it's in China, in Europe, in America, and of course, India as well. There is a conversation about guardrails as well, but around export controls as well that needs to be had.
That's a very long agenda that you talk about. I have to summarize conversations held over almost 3 days to cover what you said. But I think the important part is that India is viewed as a very important and key partner in Pax Silica. I think we were given pride of place in terms of the positioning, the opportunities to speak. Our views were heard with a great deal of attention. The issues primarily are on, and our emphasis was on building resilience in global value chains and making sure that what we are attempting to do in India, both in terms of building a semiconductor manufacturing base, in terms of an electronics manufacturing base, is fundamentally oriented towards making the world more resilient in terms of having alternate sources of supply for some of the key and strategic elements. And it is a process of give and take in terms of access to critical minerals and certain other kinds of technologies. What is available in some of the other countries who are part of Pax Silica, their willingness to share with us and work together to make sure that we build a more resilient and more diversified supply chain of critical materials. I think that is the sum and substance of these discussions. They were very productive and purposeful discussions, and India's role in this overall scenario was recognized, and India was recognized as a serious player in this entire mechanism. You must see that we are probably the only developing or emerging country in that whole grouping, and that is, I think, a significant recognition of India's strength. So we are seen as a very serious partner, and which was very good to note. As far as the AI-related and AI technologies-related issue and discussion, while this topic was broached, we did not arrive at any final consensus on this issue. The American side still has certain concerns, and they've indicated that India would be treated fairly in this overall, whenever they make up their minds on their final export control policies, and also they indicated that once they open up, there will be no rollback, at least as far as India is concerned. So I think these were the two commitments that they were prepared to provide. We will, of course, we also emphasize that this is what requires us to develop what we call strategic autonomy.
Absolutely, and that's been the core focus of the government as well, whether it's related to AI, critical minerals, or several other sectors. So do you mean to say that the approvals will start rolling out for India as well? Because, a certain set of countries have...
We continue to stay engaged, and we look forward to when that comes.
Okay, just one final question, sir, and this is on the issue of social media apps. You gave us an understanding that you're still thinking on and pondering over the response that's been given by WhatsApp and other companies. But on the CSAM issue specifically, where does the government stand? Are you satisfied with the response that you've received from Meta?
It is not a question of response from Meta or otherwise. Point here is fairly straightforward. If CSAM content is carried, that's a violation of the IT Act. Section 67B prohibits it. So if there is a violation and somebody complains, of course action has to be taken, and action has to be taken by the relevant police authorities and law enforcement agencies. So that's a separate issue. Now the question we are looking at is a slightly different issue, which is how did something, when you know that carrying CSAM content is a violation of law, how exactly did this come into how exactly did it come to be carried in the form of advertisements? Now those involve some technology related aspects and what kind of preventive measures can be taken to do that. So our concern is primarily oriented towards that. But there's zero tolerance as far as government is concerned for carrying CSAM content, and if there is CSAM content which is carried, action under the law is always going to be taken.
So what is the approach that you're going to take for the industry overall? Because we're also hearing that the government of India is looking at sort of, coming up with regulatory measures for all apps with respect to this. And so the sexual content on Meta apps has been a...
Let us be absolutely clear. I think the IT Act makes it very clear as to what kind of content cannot be carried and what constitutes an offense. I think the sections are clearly written. There is no question in those cases of even the section 79(1) protection, the so-called safe harbor protection. It is outright banned, and whoever indulges in this, whether he's the person who's posting it or whether it is the social media which is carrying it, all of them are liable.
All right. On that note, thank you very much, sir, for taking the time out once again and joining us here.
Thank you.